I found myself seated in my favorite nook, waiting for a friend to show up. This place, a small, covered patio beside Spa Creek in Annapolis, may seem unremarkable, but come summer, it turns into the most enchanting spot on earth. The marina is bustling with people coming ashore to eat, water taxis shuttling between Annapolis and Eastport, and occasionally a tipsy reveler misstepping and falling into the water. The scene is vibrant, and one can enjoy it fully with just a single beer. That afternoon, my friend Dave called, proposing a get-together after work. This was unusual for Dave, who, like me, generally prefers to stay in during the evenings. His invitation was unexpected, leading me to believe that our evening wouldn't just be our typical chill sessions with beer, nachos, and cheesy jokes. From afar, I could tell something was wrong. Dave looked profoundly upset, as though he had just lost his dog, been fired, or his partner had left him. Or maybe one of those scenarios had happened. He approached our table, and we shared a long, quiet look. "Do you want to talk about it?" He stood there, looking at the water, mouth slightly open, head slowly shaking. That kind of head shake doesn't mean no, it means he's wondering, how did things get to this point? After a while, he let out a deep sigh and quietly said, "She's cheating on me, Steve." Then, with a direct gaze, he admitted, "I can't believe it. I never thought she could do something like this." Right away, I knew this was serious. I had hoped it wasn't anything too bad, but his earlier call and his body language as he walked by the marina pointed to two things: either his wife was cheating or he had received a bad health diagnosis. Honestly, I was somewhat relieved it was the former, Dave. He is a good guy, and his loss would make the world a poorer place. "You don't deserve this, Dave. It's not your fault. I've known you long enough to say this isn't on you. There are rules in marriage, and no journey following those rules should end in deceit. The path may lead to unhappiness, maybe to a split, but never to deceit." "Then why do I feel like I've failed? Maybe I can share a bit of my story that could shed some light on this for you. We move through life boldly and foolishly, thinking we're fulfilled, enjoying existence. Then we meet someone who makes us realize how incomplete we are without them. We let them in, see ourselves through their eyes, and our worth gets tied to their love. And then, suddenly, they show us we're not the person they thought we were. We catch them lying, disrespecting us, breaking promises, seeking elsewhere what we believed was exclusive between us, and it all falls apart." My friend looked at me in shock. "This happened to you?" "You never said who would want to, if Debbie." And I had split up, maybe I'd have made it public, blaming her. But it didn't go down like that. I was lucky she had a momentary lapse, a bit of immaturity. When she came to her senses, she saw how important our marriage was to her. It wasn't easy, but we slowly got back together. It helped that she was truthful, and I never caught her red-handed. If I had, forgiveness might have been out of the question. We got back to where we were, now more together than ever. It's not that we were unhappy with each other. Debbie was battling insecurities, a false sense of not being good enough, and that cad took advantage of her vulnerabilities until she did something she swore she'd never do. With that, I started to share my own story, one I had never told, because telling it meant acknowledging its existence, something I had always avoided. Of course, you know part of our story. We were high school sweethearts, started dating during high school, and from our first date we were inseparable. You're aware she wasn't a cheerleader, and I wasn't an athlete. We were the nerds, and also the top students. I've always had reservations about being termed a scholar, yet as time went by, we both pursued higher education, where we prospered. We landed impressive careers, climbed the ranks swiftly, and carved out a reputation in our area. Indeed, we were scholars in our high school days, but like many scholars, we've achieved notable success in our work life. There existed a singular contrast between Debbie and myself. It might have originated from a woman's wish to be integrated into society, to be included. I can't be certain. As scholars, we had our circle of friends, but we never fit the mold of the elite clique. I put up with the typical ridicule from sports enthusiasts, as did many regular students, but it caused me to respect them less. There were girls who mingled with these sports enthusiasts, taking pleasure in the mockery and scorn, yet somehow I never considered them relevant or an element of my world. They were comparable to the nettles and prickles I'd face on a hike, just a part of the journey. Debbie craved recognition from the elite. She fully understood the admiration they received from many peers and teachers. Her wish was to assimilate with them, despite being aware that she didn't completely belong. Now and then, a sports enthusiast would offer her transient attention. I was not fond of the way she brightened during those instances. For them, it was trivial fun, maybe a slight victory, but she would glow, and I would suddenly become non-existent. She invariably returned, except when she was seeing a footballer and mentioned her family had distinct plans. For a duration of 6 weeks, she was distant. That time span was enough for me. It required the entire 6 weeks for her to regain my confidence, and I perceived that I had gained the advantage. There's an additional fact about Debbie that you might presume, though it's not something I'd vocalize. Her chest is unadorned. I don't imply that she's slightly endowed or lacking fullness. They're not pairs or trios, they're simply unadorned. My spouse has the chest of an adolescent boy. Yet privately I appreciate them. I looked at him and momentarily felt remorse for speaking as if I had dishonored her. Just to be clear, none of this is of consequence to me. Whether she's shaped like a classic statue doesn't bother me. I cherish this woman. The only thing I've desired from her understated chest is that it remains solely mine and that she responds to my touch. That's essential. She may have the chest of a youth, but that doesn't mean she exposes herself in the heat. It's not her looks that count, it's her essence, and my wife is a woman of modesty, as she rightly should be. I treasure that woman. As previously stated, over time we've climbed the ladder in our professions and crafted our mature lives, leaving the trivialities of high school far in the past, or so I assumed for myself and believed for Debbie as well. I was incorrect. Throughout university and our professional lives, she nurtured a shard of that high school bitterness within her, a dormant explosive that, when ignited, burst forth. I took a moment to steady my thoughts, nearing the most harrowing segment. We strategized our future. That's a scholar's approach. We had a blueprint for 5 years and another for 10, and we were approaching the conclusion of our 5-year strategy, poised to begin a family imminently. Every man ought to comprehend this about women at any moment. For whatever reason, they might opt to partake in intimacy, and if they resolve to, they will. It's immaterial whether she's wedded or unattached, appealing or plain, trendy or plain, busty or slender. They wake up early, setting their feet on the floor, and if they decide, today I fancy a bit of leisure, perhaps I'll indulge in intimacy, they follow through. While men may brag, they don't possess such autonomy. Men spend weeks, even months, trying to woo a woman, but for a woman, it's a mere decision, and the man complies. A wife committed to fidelity in her marriage and to her marital promises must actively make this choice every day, as potential threats lurk, ready to exploit any vulnerability. Vulnerabilities like having a difficult day, feeling neglected at home, gaining weight, or arguing with her husband make her more open to outside attention. He will gain her trust, compliment her, tell her she's undervalued, and slowly erode her resolve until she starts to agree with him. The threat at my door went by Peter. A high school acquaintance, he was a familiar figure, akin to many we encounter. He did just enough to pass in school, shone on the soccer field, and was the center of every party. After graduating, he continued in this vein, relying on charm rather than tangible abilities. He graduated with mediocre grades in an uninspiring major and predictably landed in sales. He became a frequent visitor at my wife's office, winning over the office manager and the higher-ups. He seized every opportunity to. Notice my wife. My guess is their interaction went something like this. Debbie Allen, is it really you? She probably gave a shy smile, looked away, then back at him and responded. Peter, he likely said, wow, you're even lovelier than back in high school. His flattery bothers me. With hidden motives, he chatted about her job, sprinkled in some compliments, and then, as if he had no choice, went to his meeting. He might have asked for directions to the meeting room, only to find a reason to come back and talk more, always smiling and subtly flattering her, ending with, I hate to leave, but I must. How about next Tuesday? I'd love to pick this up. Great seeing you, although I wasn't there. I imagine it happened much like this. He was careful, starting off gently to avoid spooking her. The seduction of a married woman requires patience, making her feel comfortable and gradually letting down her guard. Predators quickly spot and exploit the vulnerabilities of their chosen victims, repeating this pattern many times. His approach was casual, filled with compliments and, but understanding, seeking her help. He always thanked her for her kindness. The first invitation to dinner came weeks later. Despite being married, she initially said no, but he persisted, becoming an office staple. To her, he was a known, safe figure, polite and uplifting, or a source of solace on tougher days. He kept asking for favors, expressing his thanks, making it seem rude to refuse his dinner request. To me, she made it seem innocuous. Now, thinking back, my annoyance returns. These events are hard to move on from completely. The betrayal of someone dear is painful and hard, but the same love helps in healing. I found it hard to believe that a manipulator who seemed to disregard me and my relationship existed. To him, my wife was just another target, our potential breakup, his victory. He saw me as just another duped husband, one I hadn't yet managed to forgive. Ultimately, his methods of charming her were irrelevant. He was charming and well-known, making her feel like a social focal point for the first time, satisfying a hidden yearning. Initially, his actions were subtle, non-threatening. Yet gradually she began to drift from her marital duties. Had she considered, would I do this if Steve were here? She might have seen her overstepping. His talent lay in ensuring she never asked herself that question. His chance came when I was on a business trip for a week. She went to dinner with him, thinking it innocent and without guilt. Yet she didn't inform me. She kept the dinner and everything about it from me. The dinner led to dancing, seemingly innocuous in a public setting. The specifics of how it was arranged I prefer not to know. However, she ended up spending the night at his hotel, breaking everything we had built. She felt tremendous guilt afterwards. When I got back a few days later, I found her crying in our living room, a mess. It took a long time to understand her apologies. She repeated, "I'm so sorry, I love you. It wasn't my intention," and mentioned someone named Peter, but I could hardly make sense of it. After she had wept to her limit and could weep no more, she fell into my arms, clinging as though holding on to life itself. Her tears gradually subsided, and she eventually admitted to her deeds. Every person who is married believes it won't happen to them. It happens to others, to their friends, but never to them. They are convinced they have made a wise choice. Their spouse is loyal, understands their needs, and would never wander. It just doesn't seem like something she would do. When the unthinkable does occur, they are completely unprepared. They go through denial, anger, isolation, and then pursue vengeance, desiring their partner to experience. They weep, shout, exit their dwelling, and think about ending their marriage. I have experienced this entire cycle. If a man has a network of supportive friends and family and a spouse who genuinely regrets her mistake, there's a chance for reconciliation. Their confidence is shattered, their faith in her is gone. They wonder how many times they can begin again with the same person who betrayed them. It's a painful journey, lived in a space too confined to avoid the suffering, even for just one evening. Yet, if they are lucky and both are dedicated to repairing their relationship, love finds a way. It took a year for us. For the first 3 months, we occupied separate rooms. Then, for another month, we slept in the same bed but didn't make physical contact, whether out of decency or shame. During those initial 4 months, I did not see her without clothes. She would prepare for bed in the bathroom and put night dresses. During the daylight and evenings, she kept her distance but would ask if I needed anything, prepared light meals for me, and patiently awaited my forgiveness. It was not a cheerful household. As time passed, I realized she was as desperate for forgiveness as I was. I missed my wife. We both longed for a return to the times when we were comfortable and happy together. We saw a therapist, engaged in dialogue, and even had disputes. While I mainly struggled, she took the brunt of my verbal assaults until my anger lessened enough to stop the argument. One night, as I sat pondering the course my life had taken, she came and sat next to me, gently laying her head on my shoulder. It was the first time in 4 months I smelled her hair, triggering a flood of memories and yearning. I tentatively moved to touch her shoulder, but she pulled away, misinterpreting my action as rejection. When she understood my intention, she reached out to me, and we spent that night in quiet companionship. As we went to bed, we held each other, yet intimacy did not include sexual activity. We were simply together, sharing our first moment of true closeness after 4 long, difficult months. Intimacy came back into our relationship 6 months after we began to heal. We started to enjoy our time together again, though still with hesitation and uncertainty. The memories remained, but we recognized that the door to further healing was now open, and we stepped through it together. We looked forward to the journey ahead, beyond healing though I was held back by lingering issues. I knew this situation required me to take action, not just be passive. I paused before ending my story, signaling that the ensuing details must stay confidential to protect my liberty. Dave acknowledged with a nod, and I surveyed our surroundings for any listeners, then whispered so only Dave could hear. My wife had informed me about Peter's visits to the city, in line with our agreement on transparency. However, keeping an eye on her at work was not an option. Knowing about her meetings with Peter and their conversations was crucial for rebuilding my trust. Her honesty about his attempts to rekindle their previous affair, but her eventual realization of his true intentions, eased my worries about his influence on her. She admitted to feeling reduced to an object by his pursuits, which marked her emotional return to me. Peter, consistent in his approach, pursued women, moving on when rebuffed. He frequented the same hotel and bars with mixed success. Some parking lots were dimly lit, allowing me moments of patience. Despite his nimbleness, Peter was caught off guard by an encounter involving a metal pipe, which left him disabled. I had an alibi, participating in a poker game with friends, even taking deliberate losses to solidify my cover. Story. Looking into Dave's eyes, I saw his comprehension. The core of repairing a marriage is the mutual commitment to fix it, and the real challenge is facing each other to determine if the desire to continue together outweighs the uncertainties, much like a gamble. You're not invincible, and you're far from perfect, so it's essential to forgive yourself for both the foolish actions you've taken and those you're likely to take before this ordeal is over. Ultimately, she may come to realize her errors and decide to work hard alongside you, or you might discover that what you thought was at stake isn't as significant as you imagined. You won't know until you take the first step. My friend's expression was as perturbed as it was when he first sat down, yet he nodded in agreement. He understood for better or worse the course of action he needed to pursue. Another thing, I looked around again to make sure we were alone. Seeking revenge won't solve anything, but it can reclaim what was taken from you. Therefore, if you follow my counsel, make sure not to get caught. Most importantly, concentrate on repairing your relationship. You have more questions than answers, especially regarding critical issues. Pursue the answers and contemplate what you seek and what you're unwilling to give up. Recognize that you both cannot change what has happened. You can only proceed into what lies ahead. Explore what the future might bring before deciding on anything. Will the pain ever end? I looked at my friend. I can tell you that with time, the pain lessens and becomes less frequent. Eventually, it feels more like the echo of pain than the pain itself. At least that's how it seems to me now. But I am with a partner who sincerely regrets her mistakes. You need to figure out where you stand before making any decisions. We spent the next hour sipping beer, and then we headed home. I went back to my loving wife, my companion and friend since high school, whom I had lost and found again. Dave returned to his uncertainties. No matter what he found there, he knew he had friends in his life he could depend on. He wasn't alone. That was the gist of it. Sometimes relationships end, and sometimes they can be restored. At times, the unfaithful partner deserves punishment, and at times, both deserve to feel whole again. It depends on their collective wishes and their willingness to trust each other once more. David's story. How did everything in my life fall apart so quickly? This morning I woke up a happily married man, grateful for a devoted and beautiful wife at least. She's beautiful to me. Tonight I come home to a wife who has betrayed me, and I'm in the dark about why, how often, or who the other person is. I've seen him, and I've seen them together, confirming her infidelity, but that's all I know. Let me introduce myself. I'm David. The specifics of how and where I met my wife, our living situation, and what I do for work aren't important. I'm simply a man who loved his wife, and now has to face that she's not the woman he thought she was. You might wonder how I got to this point. The day started as any other, with the love of my life beside me in bed. I showered quickly, got dressed, and woke my wife up. It was a typical morning on a workday. Usually I grab a cup of yogurt and leave for work about 45 minutes before my wife, so by the time she starts her shower, I'm out the door. I often pack my lunch, and once a week I might pick up a snack near the office. Today, I decided to take a stroll. My morning at the office passed without incident, nothing to complain about. Around 11:20 a.m., I had a sudden urge for chicken fried steak and chicken, a craving I indulge in every month or two. I know it's not the healthiest option, but when the craving strikes, I go to Denny's for hash browns, fried steak, sourdough bread, orange juice, and coffee for breakfast, or rather, a breakfast for lunch. Today was supposed to be one of those days. The journey lasted 20 minutes, yet I managed to reach Denny's ahead of the noon crowd and selected a window seat. Engrossed in my solo pastime of observing passers-by while enjoying my meal, my focus suddenly shifted to the scene unfolding across the street. It was then I observed an event that took me by surprise. My spouse stepped out of the vehicle, shared an embrace and a kiss with a stranger to me, and together they entered a motel. Such an event is something for which life never prepares you. At first, your mind goes blank. There I was, motionless, simply staring, struggling to come to terms with the scene before me. Then your mind starts racing with questions. Did I really see that? Was that actually my spouse? Is an affair taking place? Is there a plausible explanation for what I've just seen? This is followed by a phase of denial. It can't possibly be her. There's got to be a reasonable explanation. Perhaps I'm jumping to conclusions too quickly. I reached for my phone and called her. She answered on the third ring. Hey, everything okay? Yes, just checking in on where you are. My attempt to sound casual clearly didn't work. After a pause, she replied, I'm at my desk. I'm working through lunch, and it looks like I'll be late home tonight. That was a lie, a first for her. Is that so? I responded, my voice barely above a whisper. That's unfortunate. Well, I better go, and ended the call. Thinking back, she must have found my call strange, yet she didn't call back. Now, my confidence in everything, especially my observations, dissipated. I stayed in my seat, stunned more than anything. It's interesting how the mind slows down in such moments. It probably took me 5 minutes to gather the bravery to go and investigate. A husband believing in his wife is reluctant to accuse or invade privacy. Leaving $20 on the table, I left the diner. In retrospect, it's surprising I had the composure not to dash directly to the motel, but I made it across the street safely to the motel's parking lot. Confirming the car was hers, I moved toward the room with trepidation, as if approaching a sleeping beast, aware of the danger that awaited. Nearing the window, I noted the curtains weren't completely closed, typical of many motels. Glancing through the small gap, I verified my marriage was in jeopardy, my head filled with vengeful thoughts. I fantasized about barging into the room, confronting him, ramming her car through the door, or simply giving in to despair. However, in the midst of this chaos, a rare moment of clear thinking presented itself. The pain briefly eased, giving way to rational thought. I realized I needed proof. The woman and the man were now just subjects in my field of view, their actions problems needing documentation. I filmed them with my phone through the crack in the curtains, took a picture of my wife's car parked next to his, with the room's door clearly visible. Then, feeling a complex mix of grief and rage, I went back to Denny's and ordered another coffee. Returning to my spot by the window, watching the motel's entrance, the reality of her deceit deeply affected me, and sorrow overwhelmed me again. Swamped by feelings, I cried openly, drawing attention from other patrons. The waitstaff attempted to console me, kitchen workers came out to offer assistance, and strangers showed their support. I brushed aside their kindness, admitting to them my wife's infidelity and my recent discovery. It's doubtful any diner enjoyed their meal after that, but it was moving to witness the compassion from those unfamiliar with my situation, even as others chose to ignore it. I stayed until I saw them leave together, pondering if they might be colleagues attempting to dodge office gossip by arriving separately. I experienced odd flashes of brilliant clarity amidst my anger and pain. I took out my phone again to check the recordings and photographs and called my friend Steve. Later, I went back to my job, trying to concentrate on work, but I was really just killing time. At the end of the day, I met Steve for a few drinks. He shared his own experience with his wife's betrayal and how they worked through it to heal their relationship. He made it clear that mending a relationship is possible, yet it demands cooperative effort, and I wouldn't understand its feasibility until I confronted her. His advice was accurate. My mind was flooded with thoughts of revenge, seeking legal advice, and the impulse to share the video with everyone I knew, including her family. Nevertheless, I realized I sought answers to the questions that were still forming in my mind. As I drove back, my mind was in disarray. I harbored an aggressive urge to confront her, but simultaneously begged her not to leave me. I felt compelled to show her the evidence while maintaining patience and speaking gently. Before reaching home, I stopped a block away to calm my thoughts. I made some fundamental choices, recognizing that I couldn't control the outcome of the confrontation. I resolved that I would not accept betrayal, lies, or embarrassment. With a clear head, I approached the last block to our home. She greeted me with her usual warm hug and a kiss that almost made me sick. "What's the matter, David? Was today difficult at work? Any trouble with Steve and Debbie? No, not with them. It's about us. You. Understand, Barb, the three of us. What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting a pregnancy, Barb. It's about your affair. I saw you at the Starlight Motel today. I filmed it." "I know, Barb." I understand. Her face turning white with shock was something I hadn't seen before. She went pale, lost consciousness, and collapsed. At that moment, I regretted letting my rage take over. Now, with my wife lying unconscious before me, I remained her husband, obligated to act as one. I carefully lifted her, placed her on the couch, and placed a cool, damp cloth on her forehead. She soon woke up, looking defeated and quietly staring at the floor. "How did you discover? Does it truly matter? Probably not. We thought we were being careful, knowing that others escape infidelity unscathed. It brought me no comfort. Who is it? I can't say." Realizing she was keeping secrets was a troubling sign for the potential to repair our relationship. I displayed the video I had captured earlier. "Tell me who it is, or we have no future." Her eyes met mine, filled with sadness. "Is there a future after what I've done?" Despite her doubts about forgiveness being beyond reach, I sensed she might be correct about our relationship's condition. Attempting to control my feelings, I engaged in a calm and logical conversation with her. "I spoke to Steve today. He and Debbie got past a similar situation a year ago. We can get through this. We can rebuild our marriage." This confession made her sob even harder. She didn't object to anything, and I was prepared to ask the critical question, "Do you want us to come back together?" Her response was an indifferent shrug. Did that mean she was uncertain, or did she prefer not to discuss it? I simply sat, watching her. As time went on, we sat next to each other, without talking or looking at each other, just existing together. Eventually, I decided to rephrase my question, "Do you want us to revive our bond?" Barb suddenly began to wail and scream, jumped off the couch, ran to our bedroom, and slammed the door behind her. I saw no reason to follow her. I stayed seated, wallowing in my own misery. After 30 minutes, she came out, dragging her suitcase. She walked towards the exit without a word, then stopped, looked back at me, and quietly left our apartment. It appeared I had my answer. The subsequent week was exceptionally challenging. I went to work, trying to immerse myself in my duties, but it was futile. I shared my situation with my boss and was transparent with my colleagues. I saw no reason to hide anything. While some might think I should be embarrassed by my spouse finding solace in someone else, I remained true to my word. I didn't hide her betrayal. Meals were reduced to simple burgers at a diner, and my evenings consisted of beer and TV, which I mostly disregarded. I wondered why she had left so suddenly. Was it always her plan? Was she consumed by guilt? Did she have feelings for him? Did she ever truly love me? Such questions arise from betrayal. Relief came a week after my confrontation with Barb. By then I had sought legal counsel to begin divorce proceedings. Knowing she had taken up residence with that person, I didn't seek additional explanations. David was correct in his assertion: fixing a relationship is not a solo endeavor. Secluded in my flat, my thoughts turned to infidelity. Odd, isn't it? Years of building a life together, supporting each other through illness, rejoicing over each other's successes, only for an affair to throw it all into disarray. It appears trivial next to the entirety of a shared existence, yet it exerts profound impact. At that moment, I realized it extended beyond mere physical connection. It wasn't about the pursuit of another or the quest for gratification. In every intimate moment, there's a point where a man seeks to possess his partner, and she, in her turn, opens up to him, even desiring his lineage. The ugliness of lies and deception is one thing, but the deepest cut is when basic instincts take over, seeking completeness with another. This instinct may diminish and often must be relinquished later on, but it forms the essence of every betrayal. How can one partner accept it if the other's heart belongs to someone else? I indulged in self-sorrow, as was my custom when the doorbell rang. Torn between hope and fear it might be Barb, I paused before opening the door. The figure greeting me spread a smile across my face for the first time in days. Denise, to what do I owe the pleasure Denise and I have shared a friendship since our youth. She's a fiery-haired woman with eyes full of life. Known for her quick temper and bursts of joy, she's always been a reliable friend. During my single years, I had thought about asking her out, but our timing was always off. Either she was enamored, or I was seeing someone. She was present at our wedding and knew my wife well. Denise always brought light into my life. Is that your way of saying hello to a friend? I've come a long way, she said, her voice carrying a light-hearted complaint. Her smile was inviting, and her playful banter reflected her lively spirit. Do come in. I'm in need of company, even briefly. As we took our seats on the couch, and before I could engage in any significant conversation, she said, I've been informed about Barb. I'm truly sorry to hear that. To offer some solace, in my view, she's making a mistake. This is actually quite comforting. You can't imagine the kind of doubt I've been dealing with. I go to work, perform my duties, and then return here, engulfed in melancholy. She took my hand, rested her head on my shoulder, and for about an hour we sat like that, talking, occasionally laughing, reminiscing about old times, and thinking about what the future holds. The evening passed quickly, and I felt my mood improve. Eventually, Denise stood up and asked, Would it bother you if I used your bathroom? Of course not. You know where it is, I answered. With that, she moved towards the apartment's rear, past the bathroom in the hallway, and entered my bedroom. I realized too late what was happening. Shortly after, she called out, Could you help me with this? Sometimes men can be so clueless. I walked back to the bedroom, rounded the corner, and found her wearing one of my shirts, her lower half bare. Shocked, I stood there, mouth open. When a married man is suddenly in front of a scarcely dressed woman, his first reaction is often that he's made some mistake. She laughed. Is this how you greet a woman? She moved closer, arms circling my neck, and kissed me in a way that made my heart race anew. As we embraced, I inhaled her scent, felt her body through the shirt, and sensed her movement as she pressed closer. She laughed again, her laughter now hinting at something beyond mere humor. Denise, I know I'm feeling low, but you don't have to do this for me. I'm not doing this for you. This is for me. I've wanted you for a long time, and it was hard watching her take you from me. I won't just stand by as someone else claims you now. I'm making my claim, she said, chuckling. If you want me to leave in the morning, I will. For now, I just want to try being the girlfriend you deserve. What was I to say? Is there any man who could turn down such an offer? If so, he might want to consider professional help. I knew my answer and spent the rest of the night confirming it. At dawn, I got breakfast ready for her, and upon leaving the flat, the broad, silly grin on my face was unmistakable. Although not fully healed, I felt satisfied. From that night on, we hardly spent a moment apart. My divorce wrapped up with little fuss, and 4 months after our first evening together, Denise moved in with me. The shift was straightforward. She rented out her apartment. She didn't make any assumptions, but about 2 weeks following our initial night, she asked if she could store some of her items at my place. I eagerly agreed. Whenever she had more things to bring over, she'd check with me first, and my response was always positive. I understood her motives and was delighted by them. Barb took a portion of our furniture, making room for Denise's things. This arrangement was my preference, and I encouraged Barb to take even more. It might have hurt her feelings, but it was never my goal to cause her distress. The betrayal by Barb still hurt, but Denise became my comfort, guiding me through my emotional ups and downs and self-questioning. At this point, I was creating a new life with Denise. Moving past Barb's betrayal required time. I was keen to develop my bond with Denise as something new, apart from my failed marriage with Barb, though the past always catches up in new endeavors. A pivotal event was at Denise's workplace. Christmas party which we attended, I aimed to make a good impression on her co-workers. I engaged with her friends, danced with some, and even had a beer with their partners. There was Frank, who kept asking her to dance. Whenever she came back to our table from dancing, Frank would find a way to ask to join. His persistence became annoying, and I noticed he often wore a smug smile whenever he did this. During the party, as I was having a beer with some spouses, I saw Frank touch her inappropriately. Before I could intervene, a sharp slap echoed in the room. She broke free from him and hit him so hard that the room froze, the music stopped, and then my bold assertive girlfriend loudly announced for all to hear, "No, I won't sneak off with you, and if you ever touch my rear again, I saw the determination in her eyes, and before I could defend him, she struck him with a strong knee to the groin. Frank screamed, collapsing and holding his groin. Denise then turned to me, saying we should leave. Our departure was far from discreet. We bid her boss goodbye and offered our apologies. Outside, expecting a reprimand, we were instead met with understanding from her boss, who said, "I witnessed what happened, and I'm sorry. Frank's behavior is unacceptable, and it's clear his days here are numbered. I won't fire him on the spot, but I'll let him know his future here doesn't look good. I'll advise him to start job hunting, and I believe he'll be leaving soon. If he bothers you again, please contact me directly. I grew fond of him and the colleagues I met, excluding Frank, and felt genuinely good about my relationship with Denise. That evening, all my doubts disappeared, and I realized she was the life partner I was looking for. We got married about a year and a half later, taking our time to evolve our friendship into love, building our union on trust and openness. Epilogue: the reason behind Barb's infidelity remained unknown to me. When she left, I firmly believed she understood that forgiveness was unattainable and opted for the only path available to her. She moved in with that man, but their relationship was fleeting. Men who engage with married women seldom turn out to be good partners. Denise healed my life, bringing me happiness. I hold no ill will towards Barb and wish her the best in her search. It's been 5 years since Denise and I wed. We have a daughter and are expecting a son. She still works at the same company, advancing in her career. We often have her boss and his wife over, along with Steve and Debbie, for our social gatherings. It's a joy to see them prospering together. Indeed, we purchased a home 2 years ago, a simple first home that suits us perfectly. Life is rewarding. I have a wife I love and trust implicitly, blessed with 2 children, and she humorously suggests adding more to our family. Confident in her faithfulness and character, I simply agree with her suggestions, trying to wipe that silly grin off my face and heed her guidance. Subscribe to our channel so you can prevent your partner from cheating, and tune in to the next story, which is even more astonishing than this one. If you're under 18, refrain from listening to the next narrative.